We are here with Marc Stein with talkSPORT, discussing NBA and sort of the big talking point at the minute. You've got two MVP candidates, Giannis, Wemby, both down. I think injuries are up about 200% since 2 years ago. So, what do you think is to blame for that?
Well, in terms of star players, I think that's the number you're referencing. And look, this is something the whole league is talking about, something that is of great concern to front offices all over the NBA map, because it's not something that you can just easily fix. And it's not even something, look, I am not a medical professional, so I do not want to sit here and pretend that I'm a seasoned doctor who can provide all the answers. But when you talk to front offices, when you talk to medical people with the various teams around the league, I mean, the thing that is most frequently pointed to is just the pace of the modern game. It's much faster than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. This is the third season in basically since 2018-19 that we're seeing 100 possessions per 48 minutes, which is much more in line than it was. It's much more in line with where it was in the late 1980s. But it's not just the pace; it's modern defense, the court coverage responsibilities that are involved because of all the 3-point shooting, hard sprints to closeouts, hard stops on those closeouts, the mileage. You Steve Kerr, the Warriors coach, you keep hearing Steve Kerr talk about mileage. What he's referring to is the actual mileage that players are piling up because of the pace, because of where modern defense takes them all over the floor. We're seeing teams like Portland and Indiana apply full court pressure more than we have in recent years. And then, it is still an 82 game season. That is not going to change. Owners are not going, there's routinely calls for the league to shorten the schedule away from the 82 game schedule that's been in place since, longer than I can remember. And teams don't want to shorten this. Owners don't want to shorten the season. They don't want to lose home game revenue. So this is something that everyone in the league is wrestling with, how to deal with it, because it is I'm just being honest with you. It is last weekend. It was flat out depressing as a reporter to be in the space of 24 hours. I found myself tweeting injury updates about four prominent current or former All-Stars, calf injury. It was Anthony Davis, John Morant, Drew Holiday. Then the Spurs, as you mentioned, they announced that Victor Wembanyama has to be sidelined now for a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks with a calf injury. And then Giannis Antetokounmpo, groin injury. And it's just been, one after another. And there's no question, especially at the beginning of the season when the season is new and everyone's excited to have the game and the league back in their lives, and this stuff happens. So there's a lot going on here, and the reality is answers are not clear.
Yeah, and like you say, it's a multifaceted issue. I mean, there's not going to be one single solution. Players are a lot bigger now, as well as the extra load you're talking about. Michael Jordan has sort of said that he doesn't think load management should be a thing. I mean, is that something you think the teams might be considering, or do they want their players out as much as possible?
Well, obviously, anything Michael Jordan says is a stop the presses. Let's hear what he has to say. I mean, he's making these appearances on NBC, and everyone loves to hear from him. And look, Michael Jordan always wanted to play, and a lot of times he didn't miss time unless something was seriously wrong. But again, everything I just said at the top, it is a different game than it was in the 90s. And that's the reality that teams and the players who are out there are confronting. Again, it is just not just the pace, but just with the 3-point shot and the way it has spaced the floor, and again, in the 90s, in the Bulls' heyday, when they're winning 6 championships in 8 seasons, the 3-point shot was nowhere near used the way it is now. I mean, a lot of people didn't regard it as a good shot back then, whereas now offenses are predicated on getting to the rim or creating open threes. And so the game is so different than it was that it forces teams to apply caution, and why player health is such a constant topic, because again, just look at the names we talked about who guys are not playing. I mean, it is sad.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to happier topics and guys that are playing and playing very well, Cade Cunningham sort of played a big part in an electric start for the Pistons. Like, they're flying. Do you think that's been surprising? What's behind it? How have they taken that step up this season?
Yeah, certainly they were not expected to be this good. And look, I said the Pistons were the best story in the NBA last season, going through a 28-game losing streak the season before, which it's the longest single-game losing streak we've ever seen in NBA history. To deal with that much defeat night after night after night after night. Last season, they bounced back all the way from 14 wins to 42. Cade Cunningham makes his all-star breakthrough. So already last year, they were darlings. It was an incredible story. What they're doing now, in a lot of ways, it's taking an even harder step to go from good to great. And one of the big questions about the Pistons was, okay, who's going to be, is there another all-star here? Cade Cunningham, as good as he is, can't do this by himself. Jalen Duren has been fantastic. Jalen Duren was eligible for a contract extension up to the October 20th deadline on the eve of opening night. Didn't get that contract extension, which means he's going to be a restricted free agent next summer. But Duren has played at an all-star level. The Pistons, they lost a lot of shooting and a lot of the veterans that they had in their squad. But like, Cade Cunningham is playing. He's going to be in the MVP consideration. I don't know what his chances are to actually win it, because there are so many. Jokic. I mean, Jokic started November. The Nuggets started 7-0 in November with Jokic shooting better than 70% from the field, which is not even humanly possible, and yet somehow he did it. So the MVP race with Luka and Giannis and Jokic, it's going to, and obviously SGA, the Thunder, could easily be undefeated as we're taping this. So, I mean, those are your 4 consensus best players in the league: Jokic, Luka, Giannis, SGA, and that doesn't even account for Wemby. So it's just getting into the MVP top 5 is going to be really challenging for Cade Cunningham. But the Pistons have the best record in the East. He's their best player. If this continues, if the Pistons post the best regular season record in the East, I think Cade has to crash the top 5 of the MVP conversation somehow. And the best part of this for the Pistons is not just Duren's rise, but they also have the pieces and the flexibility to go out and make moves. So they can be patient and let their young guys continue to mature and grow together, or they can say, you know what, we're there now. Let's take a big swing and go out and get somebody else to make this team even better. So, I mean, they are in a great spot in terms of they've got multiple directions they can take this thing. And again, just to remember where they were 2 years ago, like, I'm trying to think of what the football equivalent would be of losing 28 straight NBA games is. And I'm not even sure what it, posting less than 10 points in the Premier League season. Like, it's just 28 losses in a row is really hard to do in the NBA. And they got through it. They bounced back from it. And you didn't see Cade Cunningham say, I want to go somewhere else, trade me, get me out of here. He lived through it. He got to the other side. He's been rewarded with a max contract, and he's been absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, unless the Tennessee Titans make the Super Bowl next year, I think you're right. This is just an unprecedented thing in sports. And obviously, Cunningham's been a lot behind it. And a lot of the players you mentioned there in the MVP race, you've got Canada, you've got France, you've got Greece represented. So for Team USA, with LeBron out, Steph Curry looks unlikely. Do you think Cade is someone that the country can build around? Obviously a home Olympics coming up.
I mean, he's going to be on the team for sure. There's no question about it. Like Cade Cunningham is, you say that, Luka Doncic is a big guard and an offense unto himself. And Cade Cunningham, it's a similar profile in terms of build. He's a big guard and lock to be on that 28 team. And, the 28 team is going to be very good. There are still, obviously no country has a deeper pool of talent than the United States, but that team's going to be under a lot of pressure. It's going to be a home Olympics in Los Angeles. And, we saw how much they struggled at the last Olympics, just dealing with Serbia and France. So it's going to be fascinating to see the composition of that team. Again, it will be star-laden and very good, but a lot of pressure trying to win that gold medal at home.
And I guess that's the price you pay for getting so much international talent flooding into the NBA is, you're then giving these players the platform to perform for their countries as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's football is still the most global sport, but I think the NBA is an unquestioned number 2.
Mm-hmm. And another player that's sort of potentially rookie of the year material, Cade Cunningham. He's come out from under Cooper Flag. Shadow, obviously a brilliant Duke team, and he's had such a good start. Again, is that a surprise, or do you think people might have been expecting that from him?
He has a lot of fans, and he's a number 4 pick, so it's not like he was the number 14 pick or the number 24 pick. I mean, he is a top 5 pick, but there's also no denying he is the fastest player in league history to make 53s. He's been tremendous, not just shooting the ball, but just the all-around game. He is playing. I mean, the top of this rookie class is just sensational. And, it's funny. My good friend Bill Simmons has been hyping up Cade Cunningham since the summer. And I hate to have to admit when Bill is right, but, he has been, he's been tremendous. And the Hornets, they are being talked about a ton, because obviously we've got the LaMelo Ball situation now. What's going to happen with his future there? But unfortunately, Brandon Miller hasn't been able to stay on the floor due to injuries. But they didn't just draft Cade Cunningham. They also got Kalkbrenner, who has been another really good rookie here. So all of a sudden, in this rookie class, they got 2 guys who are able to play right away. And I saw Charlotte. I'm based in Dallas. I saw Charlotte very first exhibition game. Kalkbrenner was outstanding in that game as well. And just, they've got, they have some very interesting young players. And again, there's already a lot of conversation league-wide about where things go from here with LaMelo Ball.
Sure. And yeah, it's an interesting one because, like you say, the record hasn't shown it, but they probably did quite well with their round 2 picks. They've obviously nailed their top 5 pick from the look of it. So, LaMelo Ball, do you think the team is going to play hardball at this and just refuse, or do you think there might be a price for him?
Well, look, at this point, the early signals, LaMelo Ball has pushed back on the notion that he's open to a trade. The signaling coming out of Charlotte, again, it's very early. Trade season in the NBA really starts around December 15th. That's the date that most players who sign contracts in the summer become trade eligible. So the reality is it's too early for serious trade discussion. That's still, December 15th until the February 5th deadline. That is really trade season in the NBA, the in-season trade window. But, to this point, the Hornets are saying they don't want to move him. Now, How firm will that stance stay? Is that where they will stay? And then the question is, what even if the Hornets did decide, you know what, we'll take your calls, we'll listen to your offers. What's the market going to be for LaMelo Ball, whose efficiency has been declining these last few seasons? But more importantly, he has not been able to stay on the court either. I mean, it's a remarkable stat. I think LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller have been eligible to play together in roughly 180 games, some number in that range, and 140 times it hasn't happened. Like they're not getting on the court together at the same time. And the Hornets would naturally want to see that. They want to see LaMelo Ball with Konkanippel, with Kalkbrenner, with, Brandon Miller. Let's see what this young core looks like. And just more often than not, they can't get the four of them playing together. So given the trajectory of LaMelo Ball's last couple seasons, I mean, it's a very fair question. What kind of market would the Hornets actually generate? Would there be robust trade interest for LaMelo Ball? It's a lot of the same stuff you hear about Ja Morant in Memphis because of Ja Morant's injuries over the past few years and how that's affected how often he can play. How robust would the market be if the Grizzlies ever reach that point? So this is another big talking point in the NBA. There's no question that teams are wondering, LaMelo Ball, Ja Morant, even Trae Young in Atlanta, will those players become truly available between now and the February 5th trade deadline? We don't really have an answer at this point, but again, December 15th is fast approaching.
Sure. And, with the trade deadline, as you say, there's a few teams, you mentioned Atlanta, struggling. So this season, through 13 games, 4 teams had 2 wins or fewer. That's only happened twice, and it hasn't happened for, I think, 2 decades. Do you think, the NBA has obviously worked very hard to try and discourage tanking as much as it can with the draft lottery, changing the odds and things, but then you've had the Hawks and Mavericks take the number 1 pick while being in the play-in tournament. Do you think the current system is working?
Well, look, they flattened the lottery odds. So if you get the worst record if you get one of the 3 worst records in the league, you still only have about a 13-14% chance of winning the lottery. So that was the measure they took to try to discourage tanking. And the league's argument would be, yes, see, the worst record doesn't automatically lead to the number 1 pick. But I think a complaint that you hear more and more frequently is teams that get in the lottery and do well in the lottery multiple times in a short span. And then the question becomes, is that fair? Like San Antonio gets the number 1 pick in the Wemby draft and then the number 2 pick in this past draft. So they've been able to add Victor Wembanyama and Dylan Harper in very short order. And they also had Stephon Castle. So it's like they've had 3 just really high picks. And Castle's the reigning, rookie of the year. So they've had 3 really high picks in a short amount of time. And you hear that argument that, wait a minute, there has to be some sort of restrictions implemented. So you can't repeatedly flourish in the lottery because it needs to be more spread out. And so, look, the lottery came in 1985 when I was still in high school. And the NBA has been wrestling with the way to fix the lottery, to have a more fair lottery. It's been a 40-year discussion. And it's another one of those things that nobody has been able to just furnish a, yes, that's the fix. Let's do that right now. And so I do think tweaks will continue to be discussed behind the scenes because, yeah, there are a lot of teams that are not happy. The Washington Wizards have been struggling for years and years and years. And last year they end up 6. And then they look at what's happening in San Antonio, and the Spurs have had lottery luck 3 times in very close succession to get Wemby and Castle and now Dylan Harper. And the Wizards look at it like, what about us? So I do think this will continue to be something that's discussed behind the scenes, but I have to confess to you, I personally have not been smart enough to come up with how they fix it.
I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of very smart people, have struggled with that decision. And a part of it, I think, is it might only be a 14% chance, but when the rewards are so high, so you've mentioned the top of this rookie class has just been absolutely exceptional. There's some real studs there. And then 2026 is looking like you might not need the number one pick. You could be picking third and get a genuine superstar. Like, how good do you think that class is shaping up to be?
Everybody is super excited about this draft class, but then that's also part of the luck. When the Hawks recently got the number one pick, it was the first time I'm blanking now. It was first time since the 80s, I believe, that they had the number one pick. And the best player, the player they took at number one in that draft was Zachary Richase. Richase is a good player, developing prospect, but obviously not being likened to Victor Wembanyama. And again, the excitement about this draft class, you're right. Teams are hopeful that even at 4, maybe even at 5, you're going to be able to get a franchise difference maker. So that's another huge element of lottery luck. How good is the top of the lottery in the year you're up there? The 2027 class is not being talked about in the same manner as 2026 when you have DeBonsa and Boozer and Peterson and Ament. Like, it's just not being talked about in the same fashion. So, yeah, there's a lot going on over here, and like I said, we're not even to Thanksgiving.
Sure, and I think that brings us to a nice close. Really appreciate all your insights on that, and I guess we'll have to look ahead and see what happens.
Always good to be with you.